she was meant to be his second chance, not the woman who would uncover his darkest secret. She came to Clover Ridge with a suitcase, a silence she had learned to wear like a second skin, and a kind of hope that does not announce itself because it has been disappointed too many times to make any noise. She was not looking for love. She was not even sure she believed in it anymore. She was looking for a fresh start in a town small enough that no one would know her name, and quiet enough that she could finally hear herself think without the noise of everything she had lost crowding around her. What she found in Clover Ridge was a man who needed saving just as much as she did, and a secret that had been buried so deep in such dark soil that when it finally came up into the light, it changed everything. Stay with me, because this one is going to take you somewhere slow and deep and real, and by the end of it, you're going to feel something you did not expect to feel. And if stories like this one are what you come here for, quiet, emotional, Western romance stories about broken people and second chances, and love that costs something real, then subscribe before this ends. There are many more waiting for you. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Her name was Nora Hadley, and she was 34 years old, and she had the kind of face that had once been open and trusting and had learned, through specific and repeated heartbreak, to be something quieter than that. She had been a schoolteacher in Larkin Falls, a decent-sized town in the hill country of Tennessee, and she had been good at it in the way that people are good at things that actually matter to them. She knew how to make a frightened child feel safe. She knew how to explain a hard thing gently. She knew how to sit with someone in their confusion without rushing them toward an answer. What she had not known how to do was see Robert Hadley for what he was before she married him. Robert had been charming and certain, which are two qualities that look a great deal like confidence when you are 26 and still believe that people mean what they say. He had courted her properly and married her in a church with flowers, and then spent the following 6 years slowly, systematically, making her feel like she was a problem in every room she walked into. He was never loud about it. That was the thing about Robert. He never shouted. He just said things in a certain tone, with a certain look, that made her feel small and mistaken and grateful for his patience. By the time Nora understood what had been done to her, she had already lost most of her confidence, most of her friendships, and the teaching position she had loved, because Robert had decided it was embarrassing for a wife of his to work. She left on a Wednesday morning while he was at his office. She did not leave a note because she had spent 6 years leaving him notes explaining herself, and she was finished explaining. She had a cousin in Texas, a woman named Vera who ran a small dry goods store in Clover Ridge, and who had written to Nora 3 separate times over the years, saying, "Come visit, come stay, come get some air," and Nora had always found a reason not to go because Robert had always found a reason why it was not a good time. This time she did not ask permission. She arrived in Clover Ridge on a Thursday evening when the sun was going down behind the hills and turning everything the color of something almost peaceful, and Vera was standing at the station with a wide, warm face and open arms, and she pulled Nora in and held her the way family holds you when they know something went wrong, and they are not going to make you explain it all at once. She said, "You are here now. That is all that matters." Nora pressed her face into her cousin's shoulder and breathed. She was here now. Vera's store was a good anchor. Nora helped out during the days, stocking shelves, keeping the books, talking to customers with the careful warmth of someone who had learned to be useful to people as a way of feeling like she belonged somewhere. Clover Ridge was small. Everybody knew everybody. The way small towns work. The way the same 5 names keep coming up in every conversation until you start to feel like you know people before you have even met them. One name came up more than others. Cade Merritt. The first time Nora heard it was when old Mrs. Patton came in for sugar and said something about how ashamed it was about the Merritt boy still out on that ranch alone, and the way she said had a quality to it that made Nora want to ask a follow-up question and also want to leave alone at the same time. She left alone. The second time was when Vera was closing up the store and said, offhandedly, that the Merritt Ranch Supply order was due for pickup, and that if Nora wanted something to do the next morning, she could drive it out and save Vera the trip. Nora said sure. The Merritt Ranch was 4 miles north of town on a road that ran between fields of dry autumn grass and old cedar fence lines that had been there long enough to lean without falling. The house was large and well-built and had the look of a place that had once been cared for with attention and was now cared for with just enough effort to keep it standing and not 1 ounce more. She pulled up in the wagon, and no one came out. She called hello. Nothing. She set the supply crates on the porch and was turned to leave when the door opened and he was there. Cade Merritt was tall in a way that filled a doorframe without meaning to. He was maybe 38, with dark weathered skin and gray already working into the hair at his temples, and eyes that were a color between brown and green that she could not quite name, the color of river water in November. He had a jaw that looked like it had been set against something for a long time and had simply stayed that way. He looked at her the way people look at things they were not expecting. She said, "Vera sends her regards." "And your order." He looked at the crates. He looked back at her. He said, "You are not Vera." She said, "No, I am her cousin, Nora." A pause. He said, "Hadley?" She said, "Yes." Something crossed his face too quickly for her to read it. He said, "Thank you for bringing it out." And then he picked up the crates and went back inside, and the door closed, and that was that. She drove back to town with a vague feeling she could not name. Not bad exactly. Just a particular feeling of a door that had been opened 1 inch and then firmly shut. She mentioned it to Vera that evening, and Vera was quiet for a moment in the way that means someone is deciding how much to say. She said, "Cade is private." Nora said, "I noticed." Vera said, "He lost his wife 4 years ago. Her name was Sylvie. It was sudden, and he has not been the same since." Nora understood sudden loss. She understood carrying something that had no clean edges. She said, "He lives out there alone?" Vera said, "He has ranch hands. And there is a boy, his nephew, Will, 12 years old, his sister's son. She passed 2 years ago and Will came to live with Cade." Nora thought about a 12-year-old boy in that quiet house with that quiet man, and the image settled in her chest like something that needed attention. She did not go back to the ranch for 2 weeks. Then the school in town ran into trouble. The teacher, a young man named Fletcher, had broken his wrist in a riding accident and could not write on the board or manage the classroom until it healed. And the school board was looking for someone to step in for 6 weeks, and Vera, with the particular efficiency of a woman who is good at connecting things, mentioned that her cousin had been a school teacher for 7 years in Tennessee and was not currently occupied. Nora said she would think about it. She thought about it for 1 day and then said yes because idle hands had always made her anxious, and she had been feeling the edges of herself going soft from not being used. The school had 14 children, ages 6 through 14. Will Merritt was among them. He was a quiet boy, not shy exactly, more like someone who had learned to watch before he committed to anything. He sat in the middle of the room and did his work neatly and did not cause problems and did not ask for anything, which was the kind of child that worried Nora more than allowed difficult ones, because children who do not ask for anything have usually stopped believing that asking works. She kept an eye on him without making it obvious. On the 3rd day, she noticed a bruise on his forearm. It was old, yellowing at the edges, and when she gently asked him about it, he said he had fallen off a fence post. His voice was steady, and his eyes went a little sideways when he said it, which she noticed but did not press. That evening she was standing outside the schoolhouse when Cade Merritt came to collect Will. He saw her and his face did the same thing it had done the first time, the brief unreadable shift, and then settled back into its careful stillness. She said, "Will is doing well in class. He is sharp." Cade looked at his nephew, getting his things together, inside the doorway. He said quietly, "He is." She said, "He is quiet." Cade said, "He has had a lot to adjust to." She said, "Yes, I imagine so." A pause. "I noticed a bruise on his arm today." Cade's eyes came back to her, sharp now, alert in a way they had not been a moment before. He said, "Where?" She told him. He said, "He told me he caught it on the water pump handle 3 days ago. I looked at it myself." His voice was not defensive. It was a voice of a man who had already been worrying about the same thing and wanted to know if someone else had seen what he had seen. She said, "I believe him. I just wanted you to know someone was paying attention." Cade looked at her for a moment. He said, "Thank you." And then he called Will's name and they walked to the wagon together. And Nora watched them go and noticed that Cade put his hand briefly on Will's shoulder as they walked, a quiet, "There you are" kind of gesture, and something in her chest that had been very tightly wound began very slightly to loosen. After that, the distance between them shortened by degrees. He came for Will every day. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes it was just a nod and a look that held a moment longer than strictly necessary. She began to understand his silences as a language, the ones that meant he was thinking, the ones that meant he was grateful, the ones that meant something else that she was not ready to name. He began to leave things, not obviously. A basket of apples from his orchard left on Vera's porch with no note. A repaired hinge on the schoolhouse door that had been stiff since September. Small things. The kind of things a man does when he wants to say something, but does not yet know if he has a right to say it. Nora recognized the language because it was the same language she had been speaking her whole life. He invited her to supper in the 5th week. Formal and slightly awkward about it. The way a man is when he has not done something in a long time and is not sure the muscle still works. He said Will had been asking if the school teacher might want to see the ranch properly. He said Will had also developed opinions about her cooking based on a pie she had brought into school for the children's harvest day. She said she would come on Saturday. Saturday was clear and cold, and the ranch was different in the daylight, warmer somehow than her first impression of it had been. Will met her at the gate with the particular formality of a 12-year-old who is trying very hard to make a good impression, and does not quite know how to do that without it showing. He showed her the horses. He showed her the dog, whose name was Biscuit on account of his color. He talked more in that hour than she had heard him speak in 5 weeks of school, and she thought, he just needed somewhere he felt safe enough to open up. Cade cooked supper badly and honestly, and she did not say so except with her eyes, and he caught it, and the corner of his mouth moved in the closest thing to a smile she had seen from him, and it changed his whole face. After supper, Will fell asleep in the chair by the fire, and it was just the two of them at the kitchen table with the last of the coffee, and particular quiet of a house where a child is sleeping nearby. He said, he likes you. She said, I like him. He said, he does not like many people. She said, neither do you. He looked at her. She held it. He said, no, I suppose I do not. A pause. He said, my wife did. Sylvie liked everyone. She had enough warmth for the whole county, and she shared it without thinking about it. Nora said, she sounds remarkable. He said, she was. His voice was quiet and steady around the grief of it, the way grief goes after it has had years to settle into the shape of a person. She would have liked you. Nora did not say anything, but she felt it land somewhere important. She drove home in the dark with the stars very close overhead, and the feeling that something was beginning that she had not given herself permission to hope for, and was hoping for anyway. The trouble started quietly. It usually does. A man came to town. He said his name was Garrett Cole, and he was a land attorney from Austin, and he was looking into a property dispute involving the Merritt Ranch. He was polished and careful, and he smiled at everyone he spoke to, and his eyes did not match his smile. Nora noticed his eyes. She noticed him again when she saw him watching Cade from across the street one morning, with an expression that was not a land attorney's expression. It was something older than that, something personal. She mentioned it to Vera. Vera went still in a particular way. Nora said, what do you know? Vera said slowly, there is something people in this town do not talk about. Something from before Sylvie died. Nora waited. Vera said, there was a man who used to come around. A ranch hand who Cade hired and then let go. People said there was an argument, a bad one, and then a month later, Sylvie was gone. Nora felt the air change in the room. She said, what are you saying, Vera? Vera said, I am not saying anything. I am telling you what people said. There were questions at the time. The doctor said fever. Cade never said anything different. But the ranch hand, a man named Cole, he said Cade had been cruel to Sylvie, that there had been trouble between them. Nora sat with that for a long time. It sat heavily. She thought about Will's bruise. She thought about that house. She thought about her own 6 years of a man who looked one way on the outside and was another way on the inside. She thought about the way Cade had looked when she mentioned Will's arm. Alert, protective, worried. She thought about the hand on Will's shoulder, the apples on the porch. She did not know what to believe. She went to the town record office, and she asked to look at anything on file related to the Merritt household from 4 years back. What she found was not what she expected. There was a doctor's report. Fever, as Vera had said, but there was also a second document, A statement from a woman named Louise Park, who had been Sylvie's close friend. And what it said was that Sylvie had been sick for weeks, and that Cade had barely slept, riding to town for medicine every 2 days, sitting with her through the nights, and that the man named Cole had been dismissed because he had been stealing from the ranch and had threatened Cade when he was let go. The statement said that what Cole had told people afterward was a lie, that it had been a lie told by a man with a grudge, that Sylvie herself, in her last weeks, had told Louise that Cade was the finest man she had ever known. Nora sat with that document for a long time. She thought about what she had almost believed, how quickly she had let the shadow of a doubt fall over someone who had not earned it from her, how the wound Robert had left made her flinch at things that did not deserve flinching. She thought about Garrett Cole coming to town with his polished manner and his old grudge, and what exactly he intended to do with it. She went to Cade that evening. She found him in the barn, and she said directly, because she had spent 6 years not being direct, and she was finished with that, "Garrett Cole is in town. He is talking to people about you. I want to know the truth from you before I hear it from anyone else." Cade went very still. He looked at her for a long time. Then he told her everything. He told her about Cole and the stolen money and the threats. He told her about Sylvie's illness and the weeks of watching someone he loved move away from him no matter what he did. He told her about the rumors Cole had started and how he had stopped correcting them, because correcting them meant talking about Sylvie, and he had not been able to do that without coming undone. He said, "I did not fight it because fighting it hurt more than carrying it." His voice at the end of that was very raw. Nora looked at him in the lamplight of that barn, and she thought, here's a man who had been carrying a wrong accusation for 4 years in silence, because grief took all his strength and left none for his own defense. She said, "I am going to help you." He said, "Nora." She said, "I found Louise Park's statement. I know where Cole is staying. And I know a lawyer in the county who owes Vera a favor that Vera says I can use." He looked at her with something in his face she had not seen there before. Something open and undone and grateful and frightened all at once. He said, "You went looking." She said, "I did." He said, "Why?" She looked at him and she said simply, "Because I want to know who you really were." The case against Cole was built over 10 days. The lawyer was thorough, and Louise Park came forward again willingly, and Cole's land claim fell apart because it had been built on a fabricated grievance, and everyone who needed to know that knew it. Cole left Clover Ridge without fanfare. The morning after he left, Cade came to Vera's store. He stood at the door for a moment. Then he came in and he walked to where Nora was standing at the counter, and he said, quietly, "I would like to say something." She turned to face him. He said, "I have been living like a man who is already finished, like everything worth having already came, and went, and all that was left was keeping the ranch running and making sure it was all right. I had decided that was enough." She waited. He said, "And then you came out to the ranch with a supply order and told me someone was paying attention to my boy, and I did not know what to do with that. And every time since then I have not known what to do with you, and I have been doing it badly." She said, "You have not done it badly." He said, "I should have told you about Cole myself. I should not have let you find it alone." She said, "You were not ready." He said, "I am ready now." And then he said, "I know you came here from something hard. I know you are not looking to walk straight from one difficult thing into another. I am not asking you to rush. I am just asking if there is a chance, a real one, because I would like to do this right." Nora looked at this man, this quiet, wounded, honest man who had been carrying a lie for 4 years and had loved a woman genuinely and was raising a boy who was starting to open up like a window after a long winter. She said, "There's a chance. There's been a chance for a while." The relief on his face was quiet and complete. That Sunday, Will asked her at supper if she was going to stay in Clover Ridge after Mr. Fletcher's wrist healed. He asked in the careful voice he used when something mattered to him. She looked at Cade. Cade looked back at her. She said, "I think I might." Will nodded as if this confirmed something he had already worked out. Then he said, "Good, because Biscuit likes you, and he does not like most people either." Cade made a sound that was entirely a laugh, and she had never heard that from him before. And it was the best sound, warm and sudden and real, like something finally surfacing after a long time underwater. She thought about the woman she had been when she arrived in Clover Ridge. the one who had stopped expecting anything good, the one who had learned to wear silence like protection. She thought about how the best things do not come from nowhere. They come from paying attention, from asking the hard questions, from being brave enough to go looking for the truth, even when part of you is afraid of what you might find. And sometimes what you find is not the darkness you were bracing for. Sometimes what you find is a man standing in a bar in the lamplight, finally telling the truth for the first time in 4 years, and looking at you like you're the reason he decided to try again. Nora Hadley had come to Clover Ridge looking for quiet. She found something much better than that. She found someone who made the quiet feel like home. If this story found you at the right moment, if something in it touched a tender place, I would love for you to tell me in the comments. What part stayed with you? And where are you watching from tonight? There are people all over the world who find their way to these stories, and every single one of you matters. If you're not subscribed yet, please do that now. There are so many more stories here about healing and honesty and love that arrives quietly and changes everything. You deserve every one of them. I will see you in the next one.